now you have found a seat, and that these statistics won't kick you out of it. Nearly 1 in 4 women, that includes Jewish women, in the US are expected to get an abortion at some point in their lives. And I'm going to have Sheila clarify what that number actually means, because it's actually even more severe than 1 in 4. This does not mean non-Jewish women are excluded. This does not mean Jewish women are not in the fold. This does not mean, oh, it's for non-Orthodox women. 1 in 4 women. Thus, this conversation around Roe versus Wade being struck down will have a major impact, not only in states across the country, but for the entire Jewish community as a whole. Today, Sheila Katz, the CEO of the National Council of Jewish Women, and a dear friend who I respect and admire so much because of her nuanced understanding, not only of Judaism, but of politics and of the role that we play in shaping both of those, leads this incredible organization of more than 200,000 advocates, and is here to help us understand this issue from the inside out. So again, welcome, Sheila.
Thank you again for having me. I'm really, really glad to be here.
So before you do anything, I just want you to explain what the National Council of Jewish Women is, just so we have some clarity.
Yeah, so NCJW is the oldest Jewish women's organization in the country, 129 years old. I like to say we look pretty good for 129. And we were really founded to give Jewish women a voice at the table. It was at a time where women weren't allowed at the table when we were founded, and Jewish women weren't allowed at the women's table. And so since we were founded, it's always been about making sure that the advocacy needs, the community needs, and the priorities of Jewish women are heard. So we do work to help improve the lives of women, children, and families in the United States and Israel.
So activism is at the center of your work, and actually feminism is at the center of your work long before feminism was even like dubbed a term in the world.
Exactly. We've been doing this work a long time.
So we got a lot of letters, and I want to start right here, smack in the middle, about, abortion and Roe versus Wade. And when I had a conversation with you, and I feel like you are so knowledgeable, along with my friend Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg, is that the language is so much more nuanced. This isn't a conversation just about abortion. This is a conversation about reproductive justice. So do me a favor and define all the terms first and what we're really dealing with.
Sure. And I'm so glad you asked this and brought it up from the beginning, because terms have evolved over the years too. So people who are long in this fight before me might be using terminology that's since been updated. So reproductive justice is probably the most important term for people to understand. It was created by Black women through Sister Song. You should Google them, follow them. They're amazing reproductive justice organization. And the basic concept is things don't begin and end with abortion. This is about full reproductive care and reproductive justice on your journey. If you're having a kid and then they get killed in gun violence, if you're having a kid and they don't have clean drinking water, if you're having a kid and they don't have access to baby formula, right? The concept of reproductive justice is making sure in the arc of your reproductive experience and for children that they have the life that they deserve to not just exist, but to thrive. And so it really talks about all of these issues as intersecting. So when we're doing childcare work, that's a reproductive justice issue. When we're fighting for IVF, that's a reproductive justice issue. Just as when we're fighting for access to abortion, that's a reproductive justice issue. It's about the justice and equity underneath all of these issues that connect together.
And that's a very Jewish concept, right? Abortion has communities in the Jewish community that align with it. They have communities that don't align with it. But this reproductive justice, which is about for women having full autonomy over their bodies and the right to have or have not children and to birth and raise their children with dignity, this is a very powerful Jewish issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think reproductive justice is a Jewish issue, and I think abortion access is a Jewish issue.
Okay, explain.
Well, at the end of the day, abortion access to me is all about dignity, and it is about bodily autonomy. But this is about allowing people to make decisions, one of the biggest decisions in their entire life, about whether or not to be pregnant, whether or not to be a mom or dad. Trans men can get pregnant. It's very important to be inclusive in our language So you'll hear me often say people who can get pregnant, or women and people who can get pregnant, to be as inclusive as possible to who this impacts. Yeah, this is about everything we care about. This is, I mean, when we take the word abortion away for a moment, we think about forced pregnancy. We know that there's something bad about that. We know that we wouldn't want anybody to be forced to be pregnant against their will. And that's actually what's happening in this country right now. And especially as the laws get more and more extreme, no exceptions for rape, no exceptions for incest, all of these deeply hurt us in thinking about the dignity of people in this country, which is a deeply Jewish issue. And as you know, and you're the rabbi here, Judaism doesn't have the same perception on when life begins as a Christian tradition. And what we're witnessing right now is the Supreme Court, for the first time, about to legislate when life begins according to one religion. And that's a complete violation of religious freedom that is meant to protect minority religions like us.
Okay, I want to unpack so much what you just said. The first thing is that let's talk about the Jewish conception of what when life begins. So in Judaism, regardless of your denomination or faith beliefs, birth begins at when the baby is fully a fetus out of the womb. That means that everything before that is about preserving the dignity of the mother, right? And taking care of the mother. So wherever you are on that spectrum, what you're saying is that this issue is being predicated on a non-Jewish philosophy, and that we live in a Christian state, and therefore we have to abide by these Christian rules. Is that what you're saying?
I sure am. And you just think about where hospitals are at too, and how many of them are Christian hospitals. And so this is really a moment that it's actually quite important, where Jews are elevating their voices, not just because we care about abortion access, but because we care about it as Jews. And we need to protect our religious freedom. We have to be speaking out as a unified community about this, or what else are we going to experience? What else is next? And it really is deeply problematic that they're picking one faith to impose on us, because I'm not saying the correct thing to do is tell everybody to have Judaism's perspective on it. I'm saying the only way we can have religious freedom is if we all are able to make our own health and moral informed decisions for our own bodies, guided by our own spiritual leaders and doctors or whomever we want involved in that process.
So traditionally, people think of religious freedom as like prayer in schools. They don't think of abortion necessarily as a religious freedom question. So what do you say to the people that say, like, come on, Sheila, that's not a religious freedom question? How do you respond?
I mean, it is. Like, it's not even, I don't even feel I need to convince anyone. This just is. This is pretty uniform in the Jewish world. Tomorrow, we've been working on this meeting with the White House. We have, leaders from the Reform, Conservative, Reconstructionist, and Orthodox movement going to the White House to talk about this as a Jewish issue. And so we have not found a tremendous amount of pushback in the Jewish community. If anything, we're finding people who are like, I've always known I've been pro-choice, right? 83% of Jews are pro-choice, support Roe v. Wade. We're one of the highest religions on this, according to Pew. And a lot of people just don't understand why. And so I think it's really important that we understand that this is in our text, that this is both a dignity issue and it's a religious freedom issue. And actually the best way to engage, the way we can make the greatest impact in this country, is by being knowledgeable about what Judaism says, so we can counter the incorrect narrative that faith and abortion somehow don't go together. Because that is a small group of loud people claiming a majority opinion that's simply not true. And how do you fight a faith narrative that's incorrect? With another faith narrative.
And so how would you describe that faith narrative that you say 83% of Jews, regardless of their denomination, actually are pro-choice? Flesh that out for us.
Well, I would actually start using the language pro-abortion.
I was just going to say, that's not even.
I know it's uncomfortable for some people, But like one of the reasons why people are moving away from the language of choice is like, I mean, even just look at what's happening in this country. How can you choose to have an abortion if it's not accessible? And so that's not much of a choice. And so choice actually doesn't really fully include the economic justice issue that exists here. Because if tomorrow abortion is banned and I need an abortion, I can still go get one because I can afford to get on a plane and take a few days at a hotel and go figure it out. But the average person in this country cannot afford to travel hundreds and hundreds of miles and wait several days to get an abortion. So to call it a choice when it's only a choice for those with privilege is problematic to those who are most impacted. So we tend to use the term pro-abortion. And I keep saying, if that makes you uncomfortable, then we have to actually think about how deeply stigmatized abortion is, because abortion shouldn't be stigmatized, particularly in the Jewish community where it's permitted and sometimes required. And so first and foremost, before people get too deep in the organizing space, I like to say, try on saying the word abortion this week. Sit with a friend and ask their experience in their reproductive journeys. Right? For a lot of people, they found out maybe they've had an unviable fetus at one point in time, and they've had a DNC procedure to remove an
Will you
unviable
explain what that
fetus.
is? Not everybody knows what a DNC is.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, don't need to go into the details of a DNC, but it's
if you have
removal of the baby because it's no longer viable.
I was going to say, if you've wanted to get pregnant and you cannot, right? Like, and the baby is no longer viable, there's a medical procedure done to remove the fetus. That DNC procedure is medically classified as an abortion. And in Texas right now, you can't get one unless you prove you're about to die. And I mean, that's how extreme these laws are about to be. People who are impacted by them, who don't realize they're impacted by them, are going to soon learn just how atrocious it is to tell somebody that the fetus inside you, in this case, even a dead fetus, has more claim to rights than a living, breathing human person and human woman. And that's what the challenge is, because Judaism would value your life, Rabbi Shari, and my life, and the lives of women on this call, and the lives of people who can get pregnant. And the decision that's being made by the government soon, or what we anticipate it being, is that the fetus actually has more rights than we do. And that's where the ultimate challenge comes in Jewish law, in Jewish tradition, and the ultimate fight back that we have to have, because it's excruciating when you think about what it means, both for people who want to get pregnant or who don't want to be pregnant, that somebody else is going to be dictating for them what that looks like.
Well, and also this was constantly seen as sort of a progressive political issue. And you say, actually, this is not the case. Tell me.
Nope. I mean, I say this a lot about women's issues that shouldn't even be called women's issues. It shouldn't be radical that women are equal. It shouldn't be radical that we want access to bodily autonomy. It's not a progressive issue. This is mainstream. First and foremost, women are the majority in this country, and we need to start acting like we are. We need to start voting like we are. We need to start claiming that we're the majority. And second, as soon as it's delegated as women's issues, somehow people are like, oh, I can't get involved if I don't identify as a woman. And so this is a human rights issue, and this is a deeply Jewish issue. Everyone, regardless of whether they can get pregnant, should be a part of this issue and should be speaking up about this. This is one of the hugest setbacks we're going to have in civil rights in this country. Overnight, 36 million people are going to lose access to their bodily autonomy in the United States of America because of a Christian understanding of when life begins. So we need all our voices, and we can't call this a progressive issue. This is an issue impacting real life human beings, including the Jewish community, and we all need to speak up.
Well, and one of the things that I know, we've been friends a long time now. One of the things that I know is like, this is an issue that's actually brought your family together, because you do come from different places on the political spectrum. And this is an opportunity for other families to come together in places where they might be separated. Explain what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I come from a family of a variety of political perspectives. We've got people who vote right wing, we've got people who vote left wing, and everywhere in between. And this is an issue we agree on. And it's one of the few. And so I'm celebrating the fact that, like, you know, when I hear from my Grammy, it's like, what is happening with abortion right now? What are we going to do? And I'm like, yay, we're on the same page.
Right.
And
Because Yeah, I think that issue of dignity, when we frame it as a dignity issue, as a human rights issue, it's no longer about, are you pro-abortion, or are you anti-abortion, are you pro the fetus, or it no longer becomes that conversation. It's about, what is a woman's dignity in the world? And that's a very Jewish conversation. If you think about it, Sheila, at death, the number one thing we do when someone dies is we give them dignity. We don't even talk over a dead body. We don't even leave the dead body for a moment, not to compare a dead body to a fetus, but the idea is that dignity is the highest value in Judaism. And this is an extension of that conversation.
Yes, exactly. And I think at the end of the day, people try to make this a conversation that's theoretical. And what we need to do is bring it back to real live human beings, right? Talking about abortion in these theoretical terms and whether you should ban it at this many weeks or that many weeks. No, no, no. The question is, do we trust women to make decisions for their own bodies? The answer is either yes or no, right? And in Judaism, the answer is yes. The answer is yes. And they can make those decisions with their rabbis if they want. And there's plenty of people who might choose not to have an abortion as they're thinking about a variety of factors. But one of these myths around abortion that I think is important as we continue our unlearning journey on this is there's a lot of blame, like, oh, these women should have been more responsible. And I'm like, okay, first, they can't do it on their own. But second, the average person who has an abortion in this country is a mom who already has 2 kids, who is married. And they are seeking an abortion because they cannot afford a 3rd child. They cannot afford a 3rd child at the expense of their current children that they have. And when you think about that, and you think about what it means in this country, right? 25% of women go back to work after giving birth after just 10 days. In this country.
Wow. Why is that, Sheila? Because they can't afford not to.
We don't have paid family leave as a requirement in this country. Right now, there's a shortage on milk for children, right? And you want everybody to be required to go have babies? Like, we don't have the infrastructure for families in this country. And I talk often, Rabbi Shari, about so many Jewish organizations talking about the Great Resignation. I call it the great set of policies that don't exist to keep working women in the workforce, because the Great Resignation has been disproportionately women who are our moms leaving the workforce because there is a lack of childcare.
Wait, let's unpack that for a second, Sheila, because what you're saying is really interesting and very important. And I think not all of our listeners are totally with you, because I mean, you're literally at the White House on a regular basis, and most of us are like sitting on our sofas, right? And so let's go back for a second. The Great Resignation, what you're referring to is that there's a huge conversation that's happened through the pandemic and post-pandemic where people are leaving their jobs. And why is that? Because they've uncovered something that has become a truth in their life, that they no longer need to be at work. Now, what we've really understood about the resignation is not that, oh my God, they learned that they could work from home. They learned, in fact, what you're saying, which is that it's just impossible to continue this.
Yeah, and who ends up leaving the workforce? If they're in a heterosexual couple, right? It's any couple. It's the person who makes the least amount of money. And who makes the least amount of money in every profession across every single sector? Women. In fact, when women actually take over a sector, when more women became doctors in pediatric care, the value of pediatric care doctors went down. And in 1 year alone in COVID, we went back to the stats of women in the workforce in 1988. And it's no different in the Jewish community. We claim to be a community that cares about families, but look at our Jewish organizations. How many employees there can actually even afford to send their kids to daycare, right? And so there's so much going on here, but I think going back to understanding that the average person who has an abortion is having it because they can't afford another child, like, think about what goes into that decision. Think about what goes into somebody's decision to be pregnant for that amount of time and what it means for medical bills, what it means that still in this country, you don't know how much you're going to pay when you leave the hospital after giving birth. I know people, it's been $15,000, $20,000, $5,000. You don't go in with them telling you what it is, you go out with a bill. And it's really unattainable for a lot of people in this country. And then we have a Supreme Court justice saying, well, that's not an issue. Just put the child up for adoption. And I'm like, do we exist to be vessels? Do we, like, if somebody wants to put a child up for adoption and wants to be pregnant, great. But pregnancy is also a life-threatening condition. A life-threatening condition, even more so if you're prioritizing the life of a fetus.
Well, it's interesting,
over the life
Sheila,
of the mother.
the rabbis very much understood that, because there's a tradition that you say Birkat Gomel. It's a prayer that you say up at the Torah post giving birth, or when you've had something you've overcome something very difficult, like a heart attack or a cancer or an illness, or as they said, like a journey on a boat that was so difficult. That's not necessarily a cruise ship today, but the fact of the matter is that you would say Birkat Gomel. Now you'd say this prayer for delivering a child, because it is a dangerous set of circumstances.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about specifically how this impacts our community. And I'm just not talking the Reform conservative community. I'm talking, how does this impact the Jewish community, and why should the Orthodox especially care about it?
Yeah, well, I think everyone should care about it. And in the Orthodox community, the conversations I've been having lately, who, by the way, have been very involved with NCJW in this. We just did a rally, the Jewish Rally for Abortion Justice. We had 4,000 people come to Washington, D.C. We had a ton of rabbis there, including Orthodox rabbis. We had a ton of Orthodox individuals there. And so when I say this feels pretty uniform in the Jewish community, I really mean it. I haven't seen something quite like this before. And I think one of the reasons we're going to see the Orthodox community particularly step up on this is because Orthodox women tend to have more children. And because they tend to have more children, they're more at risk for some of the complications that are going to make it harder to have the medical procedures necessary in moments where their life is at risk. And so first and foremost, if you're trying to have more children, your reproductive journey is impacted by this. And second, what I want to say is this ban, what we expect, this full ban on abortion that will impact 26 states pretty much overnight, it's the beginning and not the end. A lot of people don't realize Jews disproportionately use IVF to get pregnant. I know there's something.
Why is that? I've never heard that statistic.
Oh yeah. Look, their genetics, like the Jews have challenges getting pregnant, and particularly now with women trying to get pregnant later, there's more reason for people to be using IVF. So any Jewish organizations listening, you should consider actually making IVF funding, egg freezing, egg donation, all that part of your comprehensive benefits as we move forward, because a lot of people rely on it. But that said, IVF only exists because of Roe v. Wade. It didn't exist beforehand, it existed afterwards. And as soon as you classify a fetus as a life, the next question we have is, how are embryos going to be classified? And I have to tell you, I wish I didn't have to be an expert in this way on egg freezing and donations and IVF. I didn't walk into NCJW as a CEO thinking I needed to know all of these things. But I will say the number one question we've been getting lately from people is, if I've frozen my eggs and I'm in one of these states that is banning abortion, do I need to move where my eggs are? Like, wow. People are understanding that this is the beginning and not the end of legislating what we do with our bodies, how we get pregnant, if we get pregnant. And that is why it is so important right now, not a year from now, not 10 years from now, right now, that we are speaking up as Jews, saying that we support women's rights and people who can get pregnant to be able to make their own decisions about their own bodies. And no, people do not need to move where their eggs are currently. If this legislation should happen at some point, there will be advance notice. We will help, we will do what we need to do. But like, this is what people are thinking about right now. And then you've got people living in states, or their kids are going to college in these states, saying, is this where my kids should be? Right? We know this, you know, you and I both worked at Hillel. 20% of women graduate college survivors of sexual assault. 20%. And Jews disproportionately send their kids to the college campus. If you're assaulted, my first experience with abortion was as a rape crisis counselor. And a lot of people who are assaulted can't even process what's happened. They're not necessarily taking Plan B right away. They're not necessarily thinking about that because their body is in trauma. So can you just imagine somebody assaulted, finding out that they're pregnant, and then not having options in the state they live in? And as parents who are listening to this, you have to know that people who are assaulted are very unlikely to go to their parents. They're going to go to their peers. And so this is a conversation we have to start having with our kids. We have to start having with each other. We have to start talking about what it means that these 26 states are no longer safe. They're no longer safe. And we have to figure out what we need to do for those of us in the states that are safe to be welcoming, to make sure we're volunteering and showing up and at our local abortion fund. And I'll tell you the fund that NCJW just started if it's helpful.
Well, I was going to say, what can the Jewish community do? Because we have the tzedek tzedek tirdof. We have to run after and pursue justice.
Yeah.
It's often used with this issue in particular. So what is it as a Jew standing by? What should we do so we don't stand idly by?
Well, first, I just want to say, because I've got my RBG figurine over here, that Justice Ginsburg had tzedek tzedek tirdof, justice, justice shall you pursue, behind her in her office as the guiding principle for her work. And like a lot of people don't realize that it's in the section of our text where it talks about judges and fair judgment. Mm-hmm. And so it just feels extra fitting to be thinking about how you pursue justice in a just way. And in this case, one of the things, I said this the other day on another podcast that I did on Chutzpah, and it really took me aback even to say it, but I have to. We lost. We lost. I understand a lot of people are coming to NCJW now, and please continue to come to us saying, what are we going to do? The first thing we have to do is we have to admit that we lost this battle, and we have to mourn this loss. And we have to think about who this is going to impact, how it's going to hurt real people. We have to accept this loss. And then we have to organize, because this next fight is going to be decades long, like this last one. But in the interim, how do you put the Band-Aid on the loss? You make sure people who need abortions can have them. And so we started the Jewish Abortion Access Fund in partnership with the National Abortion Federation. It's a Jewish communal gift to the National Abortion Federation's emergency work. It's going to fund people going over state line who can't afford it. It's going to fund people getting abortions who can't afford it. And it's going to fund the largest hotline in this country that is going to be ringing off the hook, because people need to figure out where they can go get abortions and how they can get there. And so, I'll make sure the link is in the chat or wherever you need to go. Consider making, it's a pass-through gift. NCJW doesn't keep it. This is entirely going to help.
And it serves Jewish women, but it also serves all women, right?
It serves all women who do not have the funds they need to seek abortion care in this country. And we're proud. This is the first time in 129 years we're fundraising for another domestic organization. But we're also listing this gift as a communal gift from the Jewish community. And we want to make sure that anybody seeking an abortion sees that they're loved by the Jewish community.
I love that. So beautiful. So we have a lot of questions, a lot. They just keep coming in. So I want to turn to the questions for a moment. This is really a forum to help us understand. And what I love about this forum, Sheila, is that sometimes there's questions that you think you're supposed to know the answers to just being a Jew. And this can be an anonymous way for you to get clarity and for really to understand in a more significant way those questions that maybe, you don't feel like you're that child at the Passover table that doesn't feel necessarily comfortable to ask. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to read this one. Given that a large majority of Americans agree that reproductive rights are important and necessary, but don't believe that abortion is okay in every circumstance, do you imagine a compromise?
I don't think that's the decision the Supreme Court's going to make. And so I don't think this is what's going to be in front of us. The leak shared our worst fears come true. And to be honest, for us, it would be bad under any circumstance in which we're legislating up to what time women should be able to make decisions for their bodies. For us is a problem, because that goes to the core of dignity, right? Whose decision is this? Should we really say up until X weeks, it's your decision and then it's the government's? And so our perspective is you should always have the decision, right? And especially a lot of people talk about abortions later on. Oftentimes those are the most complex, excruciating moments in which people have to make decisions for their health and wellness. They're very unlikely to happen, but that gets talked about a lot, and people get vilified a lot if they have abortions at those moments. And it's very important to think about who's at the center of this. And that said, unfortunately, we believe the most extreme of all of the scenarios, like we've been scenario planning. We've got, should see, we're like, it's like, you know, one of those like murder mystery shows with the boards and things tacked together. We've been planning for every possible path. This is the worst one. This is the worst one. And that's what we have to understand as a country and as a people. And our fight isn't to push for those decisions to change slightly. It's to push for full bodily autonomy for every person in this country. Because how can we really be free in this country if we can't make decisions for our own bodies?
Well, and I love how you talk about this, because there's a lot of Orthodox rabbis that talk about it in the same way, that this is an issue of dignity and autonomy and literally having the ability to give yourself dignity. And one of the things I was really touched in this conversation is a lot of Orthodox women came forward and told their stories, and they didn't give their names. And they didn't give their rabbis. So the stigma is still there, but the fact that they felt the freedom to at least come forward, I think, is a step in the right direction.
I agree. I think we're seeing a lot of change in the Jewish community. A few years ago, when we started Rabbis for Repro, we were pulling teeth a little.
Wait, pause. You got to tell us about Rabbis for Repro.
Rabbis for Repro, we've got close to 2,000 rabbis now, all around the country, teaching and preaching on Judaism and abortion, making sure that their synagogues are safe places for people who want to talk about the abortions they've had, or maybe abortions that they want to be having. And we're really proud. It's rabbis of all denominations and backgrounds. We just started the Emerging Rabbis for Repro for rabbinical students. And it's really phenomenal about how many people are involved, connected. A lot of people who aren't involved or connected don't know about it. So you can actually email your rabbi and say, hi, are you a rabbi for Repro? We have kits that are starting to go out to synagogues this summer because of Roe getting overturned, that share resources for people inside the synagogues, banners that they can share around being a safe place, language around Judaism, supporting abortion access. And so all of that is coming. But we started this 2 years ago, and it really was different then. We didn't put abortion in the title because people weren't as comfortable with it. So it was Rabbis for Repro, Rabbis for Reproductive Access, Rabbis for Reproductive Equity, Rabbis for Reproductive Health, Reproductive Justice. And what we've seen since then, we themed every year when the Torah portion falls on the passage in which they actually talk about abortion. And when they talk about how the fetus is not considered the same statushood as a person, we have themed Repro Shabbat. And in our first year, we had a few hundred synagogues participant. And in our second year, we had close to 1,000 and growing. And I think there's, not all rabbis are political experts. We're not asking them all to take policy positions, but we are asking them to teach about what Judaism says. And we are saying and giving space for you to teach about what Judaism says in your denomination and your tradition, because every denomination of Judaism prioritizes the health and well-being of the pregnant person. Every denomination. And yes, there might be some nuances here and there between the movements, but they all are starting to put us on that path to normalize reproductive care as a Jewish issue. And I know we started to make progress because we're starting to see rabbis share their abortion stories, which I think is very important. And the article I'm thinking of around Orthodox women having abortions, I believe was in the forward. I could be wrong. I'm gonna have to find
I think it was in the forward. I'm not sure, but I think it was.
I just remember it felt really groundbreaking. And a few things are going to be significant for us to see that we're continuing to make progress as a community. One is people putting their names on it if they want to. There is no pressure from me, but we know that we've made improvement around the stigma around abortion when people will put their names on it. And two is the stories that we're seeing, which I think are logically make sense for where we're at, often are the doom and gloom stories around abortion. The like, I had an unviable fetus, I was assaulted, really traumatizing moments. And there are many traumatizing moments in which people need abortion care. There are also moments in which people just don't want to be pregnant. Sometimes people have sex and they don't want to have a baby at the end of it. And one of the ways I know that we've made improvement in the Jewish community is that if somebody can also just say, I didn't want to be pregnant, I didn't want to have a baby, and not actually have to justify it. right? We're still in a phase where we have to justify your abortion in the Jewish community, but we'll know we've made progress around stigma if you just don't have to. And so that's the arc I think that we have to head to. I don't think we get there without people sharing their stories. Like most issues in this country, you change hearts and minds when you realize real people have had this. And the best thing I could say, Rabbi Sherry, is what I haven't been a lifelong like abortion advocate. Like yes, I went to a Planned Parenthood rally in college. I've always been pro-choice, right? But when I started taking this job just 3 years ago and I started talking more about abortion, you wouldn't believe how many friends I have who started coming to me and telling me about their abortion stories.
Wow.
The trauma ones, the ones that were easy for them to decide, the ones with unviable fetuses, their reproductive journeys and how difficult it's been with IVF and egg freeze, like all of it. And I feel like I'm doing something holy by knowing that my friends can come to me and talk to me about this. And what I'd say to everybody here is, if people hear your judgments, you can only do it if this, you can only share it if that. If they hear it, they're not going to necessarily see you as a person that they can share their full lived experience with. And so what we want to do is create a safe enough space for anybody who's had an abortion to be able to talk about it with the people in their lives. And I think we've come a long way, and we can still take the stigma away even more.
So really good question that came out of this is like, where do males fit in?
Oh, yes. Please stay, please be in this. We need you. You know, this is a fight for everyone because it's a human rights issue. Just think about any other issue that you're passionate about. I'm passionate around gun violence, and I'm not a victim of gun violence, right? There are things you can do as an ally in this work. And so I'd say get connected, make a donation to an abortion fund, show up at a rally. Think about how abortion perhaps has benefited you, right? There's a lot of conversation right now about what these abortion bans are going to mean for young men and what it's going to mean for people, that there aren't actually options available for people to have an abortion or to not be pregnant if they don't want to be, and what that's going to mean for multiple people who are involved. And obviously not every man is trying to get a woman pregnant, and not all men are with women. So there's a lot, of assumed heteronormativity in some of these, models, but I just want to honor and recognize how much the LGBTQ community is impacted by this. So I would just say, we need you. Talk about it. Say the word abortion. Talk about abortion with your friends.
Just a couple other questions, because there's so many, Sheila, and I'm trying to just pick through them. And I'm gonna, this may be a larger conversation. This is a larger conversation, but the fact that we're just giving a taster bite today is almost like we're teasing people with it. But how soon do you think there will be a lawsuit against a state's abortion ban or onerous restrictions based on the First Amendment religious freedom?
Yeah, it's going to take a little bit of time. We're definitely exploring this. We've already have a lawsuit in Arizona, not particularly around First Amendment, but we've been playing with this and working with the appropriate people around lawsuits. You have to be able to prove a few particular things, that the law is in place because of religion, and you have to prove the person wants an abortion because of their religion, usually. And so there are some particular circumstances that we may need to meet, and the threshold is high. That said, as soon as these laws are in place, we will be doing everything we can to sue whomever we can to ensure that we have religious freedom in this country. And there's two paths really we have to go down. One is the culture war, right? We need to shift the narrative that abortion and faith don't go together. And that's something actually we can win. And that's important that we continue to do it. And we need to sue, because a crack in any of these laws protects us. There's also a potential lawsuit where we might organize rabbis suing the state over a violation of their religious freedom to counsel and provide guidance to their congregants. Like in Texas right now, rabbis can get sued for practicing their religious freedom. So you can bet in any state that we're going to be looking for these things. It'll take some time. 13 states overnight will lose access to abortion. The rest, it'll be over the period of a month or two. But by the fall, 26 states will overturn access to abortion. 36 million people who can get pregnant at pregnancy age will be impacted by it. And we'll be at the forefront in the Jewish community, really looking to see what we can do to organize We'll also be bringing rabbis and Jews to Capitol Hill to be organizing on religious freedom. And we're looking for a wide array of people to get involved, not just the traditional advocates on this, not only people who have had abortions, but anybody who sees this as a dignity issue.
Okay, Sheila, there's so many people that have written in. She's amazing. Who is this person? And I have to just say, I was there when you got this job, and I think this position could not be more perfect for you because you can articulate so clearly what it means to be a Jew in the world and for us to have true dignity. I am in awe of you, and I'm continually like so grateful to be your friend, but even more so, I want to tell people there's a lot of questions and we can't answer them all today. Rabbi Elliot Dorff, who's an ethicist on our faculty, publishes a tremendous amount on this issue. And you could go to aju.edu and find more about him and just look him up, DORFF. Also, you can go to the website NCJW and Rabbis for Repro, because there is so much information there. I wish we could talk for hours about this. It will have to bring you back. I know there will be ample opportunities, unfortunately, but I cannot wait to have you back. I'm so incredibly moved by the work you're doing. I'm so grateful that we get to play a small part in amplifying your voice, for letting you be a shofar for all the dignity that every single one of us deserves in the world. So, so grateful to you. Thank you so much. And thank you all. Come back and join us at maven.edu.
Thank you.